Welcome, everybody. Happy day. When you have Monday off, you think that you're further in the week than you are, but you're really not. So welcome back, you guys. I want to go over some information that I'm asked kind of all the time, the modality and methods that I use when I advocate and for kiddos with disabilities and serving parents. And so if we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And so when I get into meetings, I have a very specific modality that I use. And so I wanted to share this with you. So I think a lot of times we go into meetings with our questions and concerns, but we are not prepared. And when I say prepared, I don't mean parents. I don't mean schools. I don't mean related service providers. I don't mean attorneys or principals. I mean everybody. We're just not prepared. I can't tell you how many of my IEP meetings we have to table and then reschedule because it's not right. The paperwork's not right. The present levels aren't right. The documents aren't right. So, between, as advocates, one of our biggest frustrations is going back and forth with school districts to even schedule an IEP meeting. Sometimes it's an act of Congress. And so we get into these meetings, and this is how we go into a meeting. I send an email to the school or have the parent do it. Dear school, we look forward to having our IEP meeting next Thursday. Please provide us a full draft copy of the IEP document, knowing that it's just a draft and all decisions are made in the meeting. Without that draft ahead of time, it's unlikely that the parents are going to be able to make an informed decision, and we might have to reschedule. So, providing a draft to the parents is not predetermination. I don't know who taught that seminar. Excuse me, but it's called prepared, right? You wouldn't go buy a house and never see the house. You wouldn't, invest in something and never know about the investment. So parents are equal stakeholders in the IEP process. And I think sometimes we get confused that we've invited parents to our meeting. It's not our meeting. It's the child's meeting, and the parents are considered the expert. So let's all fully prepare so we can go in and have efficient IEP meetings and make sure that we write an individualized education program that is epic, that serves kids at the highest level. So people ask me what I have in front of me when I'm in an IEP meeting. So first of all, I have snacks, I have lipstick and hairspray, I have highlighters. But here are the things that I have on deck when I'm doing an IEP meeting. I have the last full individualized evaluation with the most robust contents in it, full diagnostic profile, all 7 Gs, a full achievement to include reading, writing, and math, and of course, adding OE and LC, oral expression, listening comprehension, kind of see where they are with their cognitive skills and their achievement skills. I also have last year's, the last 36 instructional weeks, IEP progress reports. And then I have the last annual IEP meeting that was agreed upon, and then the draft annual IEP meeting. So those are the 4 things that I need. The last evaluation that gives me great numbers, last year's 36 instructional weeks IEP progress reports, last year's annual IEP, and then this year's annual IEP. And so when I start out the meeting, often we get in meetings and we do introductions and then that goofy norms. Don't you like how they read you the norms? Do we all agree to be nice and obey each other and be respectful? Otherwise, we have to throw somebody out. I think it's so bizarre that we read that in special ed meetings, but we don't read that in general ed meetings. We don't read that in the other business that I'm in, but read those norms, right? We agree to the norms. And then we want to jump right to the present levels. So that's not the order. We don't jump to the present levels. Everything that we're building is from first, the known evaluations, the acuity of his disability, his unique circumstances, and then looking at the progress reports. You would be surprised how bad progress reports are sometimes filled out. This week I was in an IEP meeting and the progress report was literally the same for all 4 grading periods. And I read it to her, I said, this is literally the same. He reads 94 words correct per minute at 90% accuracy in all 4 grading periods. And she said, yes. I said, well, it's not possible that a child read exactly the same words with exactly 10 errors every time for a year. And she goes, oh, I think that it just does that in the software because it's part of the goal. And so when we have paperwork, look at it, read it out loud. Does it make sense to you? Has anybody checked it? And so in the IEP progress reports, it's going to tell you at the top who the evaluator is. So when I go through the IEP progress reports and it says the evaluator for math is Miss Johnson, I'm going to say, Miss Johnson, are you the math teacher? And she says no. So just because they're the evaluator on the IEP goal progress reports, it doesn't mean they worked on the goal or collected data. So you need to identify that. So often the evaluator on the IEP progress reports is the case manager. What does that mean? That means the teachers were sent an email and they emailed the case manager back. And so it's important that you know who tracked that data. Did they meet the goal? Often we will say in the present levels that they met their goal. But actually, when you go back and you look at it and you highlight it and you underline it, you will find that many of the goals were not mastered, but we said in the present levels they were not mastered. So if we don't master the IEP goal, we don't say we mastered it. And if we didn't master it, we need to write a new goal with different criteria, different supports, so that he can achieve that goal. We do not repeat the same IEP goal. That was confirmed that we can't do that anymore on March 22nd, 2017 in the Andrew F. decision, Andrew versus Douglas County School District Supreme Court decision. So if you don't know about that, you can go to OSEP, Office of Special Education Programs. Just type in OSEP, Andrew F. Q&A, and a 9-page document will come up and tell you what our obligation is under IDA. And it's an obligation, right? It's an obligation that we provide a free, appropriate public education. That's a 2-part standard. One, that the SCA, the State Education Agency, meets its obligations procedurally and follows procedural obligations. And number 2 is this, that the LEA is required to reasonably calculate an IEP and write an IEP to enable the student to make progress appropriate in light of their unique circumstances. Didn't say anything about eligibility, didn't say anything about medical diagnosis, didn't say anything about the stinking state test, didn't say anything about any of that, right? So we are charged with writing an IEP to make the student able to progress appropriate in light of their circumstances. So when we start the meeting, we want to go over the IEP progress reports as a committee so that we can all see where he was last year and where we are now. And then we're going to build from that, right? If he didn't master the goals, you need to put in the present levels. He had 10 goals. He mastered 6. He did not master 4. Data is not good or bad, but it is how we make a student able to progress if we don't understand where he's coming from, okay? So then the present levels, so we get to the present levels. And so the first thing that I do is I go over, just really quickly, I just say, can I run through Billy's schedule? And I'll start out, and it's sometimes it's surprising how painful it is when you sit down with the school-based members to go over his daily schedule and nobody knows. Nobody knows, right? So we go over schedule. First of all, how do you get to school, right? The present level should be pristine, prescriptive, and puffy. They should be so clear that if I pick it up, Kathy picks it up, Bob picks it up, Joe picks it up, that we can see that child. The present level should tell me, how does the student's disability impact them across settings? How the student's disability impacts them across settings. And if you don't know how it impacts them across settings, you can't write an individualized education program. So you telling me that he got a 1 on his FAST score in Florida doesn't tell me how his disability impacts him across settings. While that's important information, it's a marking point, it doesn't tell me about how his disability impacts him across settings. So in the present levels, we need input from everybody that provides the student an educational product. If you're taking notes, write that down. We need input from everybody who provides a student an educational product. How we don't just write present levels on what he has goals on, right? So if he's in ROTC, if he's in biology, if he's in World Geo, all of those teachers need to have some input. He's doing great, he's not doing great. All of those teachers need to have input. Do they need to be at the meeting? No. We need 1 general ed teacher and 1 special education teacher, but that information needs to be in there. Because sometimes, even though there's an eligibility in band, he might have a need that's arisen in band, but we don't know it because we didn't get content information from them for the present levels. And so the present level should tell me everything about this kiddo. Does he have any medical needs? Is there something going on sociologically? Are there been changes at home? Is there onset of behaviors? Is there a reduction of behaviors? What are his academic needs? And so the information in the present levels drives everything good and right in the document. The information in the present levels drives everything good and right in the document. If it's not in the present levels, it can't be somewhere else. And if it's somewhere else and not in the present levels, it's not complete, right? So as the great Dr. Mitchell Yell says, that the document has to be internally consistent, okay? So we go through and we look at their areas, kind of how he shows up at school. I always say that the IEP is from bell to bell. Sometimes it's from bus to bus, right? How does the student get to school? Does he eat breakfast? How is that going? Is he having trouble at breakfast? Is he sitting with his friends? Does he talk to his friends? And then what's his first class? Okay, so I was doing an IEP meeting the other day. I said, what was his first class? And the principal said, it's not an academic class. What? What was his first class? It's a class and they're in school. And so, we're looking at two things in special ed, right? Meaningful benefit and harmful effect. Both are always in play, but we're trying to have some meaningful benefit through his instructional day. So who is his first teacher? And you line that out. How long is he in there? 7:45 to 8:15. How many kiddos are in there? Is there para support? Is he successful in there? I have that conversation as I write a schedule long before I get to the present levels, because you have teachers talking, teachers are sharing. How's he doing? Does he have any areas of concern? No. And then as you write out his schedule, you can see how many times a day that he's transitioned. You can see how many changes there are in his day. And you get more information by taking a piece of paper, taking 5 minutes and writing out his daily schedule, finding out how many kids are in that class. Who's the second adult in the class, right? And so I love paras, but we will always know, whether you like me saying this or not, it is the truth. So general ed with a para solely is not, nor will ever be, special education. It won't be. Do I have compassion for teachers? Absolutely. Have we been penalized for the last 50 years in special education, which was signed into law December 2nd, 1975? Yeah. So special education, SDI, specially designed instruction, here's how you know it is. Because it's special, it's designed, and it's instruction, right? So I was at an IEP meeting and I discovered that he is in a general ed class for, 45 minutes. And I said, do you modify his work? No, I accommodate it. Okay, is he at grade level? No, I accommodate it. I said, so you modify it? Yes. And who is modifying that? And she said, I do, the general ed teacher. A special educator modifies work, right? And so when you walk through that schedule, you can see his areas of need. You can see where he's doing good in instructional settings. You can see where there's changes because, it's unstructured time. Sometimes our kiddos don't do well with the 50 kids at recess and 2 teachers, right? So walk through the schedule, take time, sit down and write out his schedule. And then you get people's names. And I don't know how many times in the last 2 weeks that I've been in IEP meetings and we've been, I don't want to say arguing, because how enjoyable is arguing? It's not. But we've been having a conversation about the staff and that there is a para, and the school is telling me that a para is special education. Don't know what page of the law that's on, but if you want to know criteria for special educators in the federal law, it's 300.156. Paras are 200.5 in the federal code. If you want to know what the federal code is, just go to ECFR, the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, and they're federal regulations. I had somebody the other day tell me that the laws are not linear. They're not. They're up for debate. I think they're pretty linear, and I think that they were going to be changed. We would have changed them. But if you don't have this book, go get it from our bookshelf, Special Education Academy. This is the federal law. Federal law. Good news about special education. Hadn't really changed much since December 2nd, 1975, when we signed into the Educating All Handicapped Children Act. And then in the 90s, it turned into IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So this is the book that you're wanting. The Code of Federal Regulations, Title 34, Volume 2 of 4. So Part B, IDEA. And these are legal obligations. I always say it's an odor. It's an obligation, a duty, and responsibility. If people like that, great. If they don't like that, great. But it's not an option. So every state, so just so you understand a little bit about IDEA, every year every state writes a letter. Dear Congress, we are wonderful Wisconsin. We are committed to meeting our IDEA responsibilities this year, and we'll meet them. Love, the governor of Wisconsin. And they send that letter to Congress, and Congress releases grant money. The money for IDEA is grant money, right? And so all of you amazing teachers, if you've ever written a grant for, let's say, a library, then you know that if you got the grant money, you spent it on a basketball court, that would be problematic. So schools receive federal funds for children with disabilities. Is it fully funded? Nope. IDEA was supposed to be fully funded at 40%. It's about at 11%, 8%. So that's a Congress issue. That's a Republican, Democrat, everybody issue. That's a Congress issue. So it was supposed to be funded 50 years ago. December 2nd will be 50. So that's a conversation for another day. So when we go to the Hill, which we were going to go next week, but we canceled our trip because can't meet with our representatives, we've got to fully fund IDEA. But before we fully fund IDEA, we need to make sure that the special education money gets to teachers, gets to paras, gets to special educators. Because I think too much of the money stays at the admin building in a district, okay? So I digress. So back to the present levels. So the present levels are going to give us a pristine picture of who this kiddo is, what are his strengths, what are his needs. One of the other things that you want to watch for when you're writing present levels is that it doesn't sound judgmental. And so this is the book. The book, you just go to our bookstore at specialeducationacademy.com. This is the federal law. If you don't want to get a book, you can just type in ECFR, and that's the electronic federal code, and you can just print it out there. So when you're running the present levels, it has to have everybody that brings an educational product, some input, good, bad, whatever. Data is just data. Without the data, we can't make decisions, right? So write that schedule, see how he's doing, and then we go into the present levels, right? So on the first page, it's going to say their name, their eligibility. Do we need new testing? Usually on the first page of the software, we have this little box. It says parent concerns. So the federal law is 300.324 that teaches you how to review, revise, and develop an IEP. Review, revise, and develop an IEP, 300.324. And that's what we're doing in meetings, right? We're reviewing, we're revising an IEP. So we need to get the parents' input. So 300.324 tells you the 4 components of reviewing and revising an IEP. And it's important to know what those 4 components are, because I think in schools we spend so much time teaching people software that we never taught them about how to craft an IEP, how to make an IEP, right? And so because that's such a critical need, you're going to be very excited. I wrote a book. You guys like books? Everybody likes books? Where's my book? And so we have a book that is now available for you to pre-order. This is called the EPIC IEP. It's probably backwards if you're saying it. The EPIC IEP. So I wrote this as a powerful manual, a playbook for educators, parents, and advocates navigating the IEP process. So if you go to the EPICIEP.com, it will take you to your favorite book provider, pre-order the book, and then come back and register, and it unlocks about $500 in bonuses. So this will ship in a few months, but we're so excited because this is going to teach you how I do an IEP. Not software, not compliance, not a district initiative, not the stinking state test, but how to write an EPIC IEP to change children's lives. So go to the EPICIEP.com and it will walk you through it there. So in 300.324, it tells us the development, review, and revision of IEP. So on the front page, we'll say to mom and dad, hey, how's it going, right? And any concerns, right? So the law actually says the concerns of the parent for enhancing the education of their child. The concerns of the parent for enhancing the education of their child. So it doesn't have to be your concerns, it's their concerns, right? So in developing each child's IEP, the team must consider these 4 following components. Number 1, the strengths of the child. And so we always have that, right? That school's written that into the present level. Number 2, the concerns of the parents for enhancing the education of their child. We don't usually have that. Number 3, the results of initial or most recent evaluation of the child. And number 4, the academic, developmental, and functional needs of a child. We would call that a PLAAFP, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. And so we will share parent concerns. I usually share parent concerns on their behalf. And somebody in the meeting, not you fine folks, but somebody in the meeting says, we'll put that in deliberations. No. There's no deliberations is not an IEP. The deliberations are not an IEP. The deliberations are not an IEP. An individual's education program doesn't require deliberations. There are states that will not take deliberations. There are states that take deliberations that are like, I don't know, the Book of War and Peace, they're so long, right? So we need to put the components of the IEP in the IEP. And so since the strengths of the child, the results of evaluation, and academic development and functional needs of a child, the school has put in the present levels, guess what? We are going to put parent concerns for enhancing the education of their child in the present levels. So if your school says, no, we have to put that in the case conference notes, we have to put that in the deliberations, we have to put that in another section, I'm going to say, then you're denying the parents their procedural rights to meaningfully participate in this meeting and have equal IEP team membership. And if you're going to do that, I would like that denial in a prior written notice by close of business. Okay? You have rights, but they're not really your rights if you don't, 1, know them, and 2, invoke them. Okay? So the development, review, and revision of the IEP. And there's other factors. We'll go over this in another Zoom, but it's just right here on page 62 in the federal law. Federal. You know what that means? It's like everywhere. Okay? Does federal law trump state law? It does. It's the weirdest thing. The problem with our federal law in special education or general education is that the federal law allegedly has oversight for the states. I can tell you, being an advocate for almost 30 years, I've never seen it. I've never seen anybody get in trouble from the federal law in special education. When we had the federal government come down to Texas in 2016 and Texas had put an illegal cap on special education at 8.5%. We went and presented to the federal government. They gave us each 3 minutes. I just want to tell you that I was wearing a purple blazer. I looked amazing. And we were so excited they came. And then we had a great article, a great series in 2016 called Denied, maybe 2017. A great series. And we thought this is going to bring about change, right? And so the federal government, OSEP, Office, U.S. Department of Education sends a letter to Texas. We need you to comply with this. They send another letter. Hey, you didn't comply. Could you comply? Do you feel led to comply? And so we just get dinged $33 million. But until there is a sanction mechanism for states that don't comply, Texas, Virginia, it's every state. It's not specific to anybody else. And until we have equal oversight, then we're not going to have any change, right? I know that if I'm speeding down the road and I get a ticket, I owe them money, right? That makes me pay attention to when I'm speeding again. And so until we have, real federal oversight to the states, we're going to stay in the same limbo. So I hope in that IDEA special ed gets moved over to the Department of Justice. We like the Department of Justice because this is a civil rights issue. This is a serious issue when kids are denied special education and related services. So that is our hope, that it does get moved over to the Department of Justice. But that's a conversation for another day as well. So 300.324 is how you develop, review, the development, review, and revision of an IEP. And all the components are there and what needs to be there. And so, again, if you guys are interested in this book, go to the EPICIEP.com. You can order it. Okay? So we write this pristine, prescriptive, puppy, present levels. Pristine, prescriptive, puppy, present levels. If your present levels are a couple of paragraphs, you're not done. I was in an IEP meeting the other day, and the document was 84 pages long. The social studies, now this is for self-contained, social studies present level, say it with me, was one sentence. The science present levels were, wait for it, 2 sentences. This ain't that, okay? So our present levels should tell me about this child, their unique circumstances, and how we can enable them to make progress appropriate in light of their unique circumstances. So we have these present levels. The present levels are going to, if we get the present levels right, the rest of the IEP is kind of downhill, right? Because it's going to tell me the needed goals. It's going to tell me the needed accommodations. It's going to tell me what LRE is going to look like. And it's going to talk to me about that schedule of services and placement decisions because I wrote the entire schedule out. We have last year's IEP progress, and we have pristine, prescriptive, puffy levels, present levels. Maybe they are puffy levels. And if there's an educational need, we can write an IEP goal around it. So I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and we added the eligibility of ADHD. And the goals were 2 reading goals. And I'm fine with the 2 reading goals because this student has dyslexia, but dyslexia intervention is going to help ADHD. It's not, right? Those are 2 different things, very important things. And so when we have an eligibility category, you have to have at least 1 IEP goal so that you can have corresponding services to support that, right? So in Child Find, it says what? We evaluate children with who we suspect have a disability and may be in need of special education and may be in need of related services. So when you're found eligible, assumptively under the law, you're in need of special education because you met special education eligibility. So if I have ADHD, autism, and dyslexia, I'm going to have at least 1 ADHD goal based upon the characteristics that showed up in that evaluation, 1 autism goal, and then 1 reading goal, okay? So let's not say everything does everything else. I love dyslexia, but dyslexia doesn't fix everything, right? And so we need to have goals around how that student met eligibility and the characteristics of that need, okay? If there's a need emotionally, socially, functionally, vision, hearing, dressing, hygiene, academics, communicative, language, social, anything that's an educational need, we can write a goal for. Anything that's an educational need, okay? So we've identified the areas that are going to rise to the level of needing specially designed instruction in the present levels. And so we also identify areas of need that don't require specially designed instruction, but will be important for teachers to know as they educate the students. And so do we need 100 goals? No, we do not need 100 goals. I do not want teachers walking around with a clipboard. I want them teaching, right? Teachers are ridiculously amazing. Like they are rock stars. I mean, I don't know how you take somebody else's kids. That's just miraculous, right? So we want teachers to teach. We don't want them walking around with 15 million goals. So I'm the first person to prune an IEP. So obviously let's say that he has deficits in a lot of areas in math. This is what I would say. Miss Johnson, you're the math teacher. If you could only have 1 thing that you worked on in math with Billy, what would it be? Immediately, she'll tell you what that is. Immediately. They never pause. So let's write that goal, knowing that you're going to be working in other state standards, but let's write that goal. Let's make it achievable in 36 instructional weeks with appropriate benchmarks. And then when we write the goal, there's 2 really important components to go with the goal. What would you say those are? Implementer and method of evaluation. Implementer and method of evaluation. So who's the implementer? The implementer is required to work on the goal and take data. So if you have 2 implementers, only one of them would legally be required to take data, but somebody has to take data, but they would both be required to work on it. We're going to assume that IEP goals are worked on once a week, behavior goals more often, and then related or instructional service goals at the rate of which they receive those services. So in the meeting, I'm just going to say, is it fair to assume that we're working on these goals once a week? So we get agreement there. And then method of evaluation. So under method of evaluation, I've seen the word observation. Have you guys ever seen the word observation? Say yes if you have. Yeah. And observation is important. I have to observe something so that I can collect the data. Okay. So, but I don't leave the word observation by itself in there. I remove that because in the Andrew F. decision, March 22nd, 2017, the Supreme Court justices said an observation is a teacher's opinion that can't be verified, right? So I can't remember where my car keys are. I certainly can't remember what Billy did in history at the 3rd week in September. So that's why we write down our data. Now, parents will say, I want the teachers to give me a report every week. No, 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 no. 2 words, milk and dark. Ask your teacher, do you want milk or dark chocolate? Leave the teachers alone with their teaching, right? We get IEP progress reports at the same rate as report cards. And when you get those, then we can have a teacher conference if we need, and if we need to change something in the IEP. But you don't need the teacher emailing you every single week, everything that's happening. Give them time to teach. Give them time to work on, acquisition. Give them time to work on maintenance. Give them time to work on fluency. Give them time to GMF, generalization, maintenance, and fluency, right? But being on top of a teacher is not going to go well for you, and it will impede her or his ability to instruct your student. Certainly, we want to support the teachers because they're the amazing people going in there providing general instruction, direct instruction, console, especially design instruction, and make sure at the beginning of the year that you give them what I call a Zach pack. So I get a 4x6 picture of my kiddo and I just make a one sheet. Hey, this is my amazing kiddo, Billy. He's so excited to be in your 4th grade class. Here are his strengths. Here are his needs. Here's my contact information, his dad's contact information. Let me know how I can support you. If you're working on anything, if you'll send it home, we'll reinforce it. And we look forward to an amazing year. And here is a copy of his IEP. Why would that be important? Do you think that every teacher in the school gets a copy of your child's IEP? Do you think that every teacher in the school that teaches your child gets a copy of the IEP? Anybody in the comments, you think every teacher has a copy of your child's IEP? No. And so how do I know that? Because when I do open records, when I represent families in due process hearings and I pull open records, I learned this years ago, there's a little thing, an email that goes out in August. It's called the teacher bundle. Yeah, have you guys ever seen the teacher bundle? It sounds like something we could purchase, a teacher bundle, right? And so when I pulled all these open records for due process hearings, I found out the teacher bundle went to the core content teachers, And that's a good starting place, but I bet Billy has his disability in electives. I bet Billy has a disability in ROTC. I bet Billy has a disability in music and art and football, right? And so if those other teachers don't have a copy of his IEP, how is it possible that they would implement their accommodations? You can't implement something that you don't have. So I just make sure the first day of school that all of you amazing teachers, here's a copy of his IEP. If you have any questions, let me know. We look forward to another amazing school year. Go Bobcats, right? So I provide the teachers with a copy of my child's IEP, right? Schools are crazy busy. Teachers are given a whole week to get, back to school and make up their rooms and sign 500 things. I give them a copy of the IEP so that there's no question, right? I find that teachers are voracious learners and they want information. I assume competency. And so I'm not in the gotcha plan. I'm too old for that. That's a lot of planning. I make sure that everybody has a copy of everything so that we can all serve him correctly. And then I say to the teachers, if you see any part of the IEP, because this is a new school year, then just let me know and we can have a parent-teacher conference, or if we need to actually change something in the IEP, let's have a meeting. And so we are a team. That's why procedural safeguards call it IEP team. IEP team. And if you're on a team, we're all running the same play, okay? So then we look at accommodations. And so accommodations are out of control in paperwork. You got accommodations for day, just like my Blazers. You got 5,416 million accommodations. Accommodations are a civil right requirement. So in 1973, we had the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which says you cannot be denied accommodations based upon your identified disability. Those exist in a 504 and those exist in an IEP. I would argue it's rare that you're going to need more than 8 or 9 accommodations. Most accommodations are usually just good teaching, right? You're going to do that anyway. An accommodation, we know without this accommodation, he will not make expected progress on his IEP goal. So that's the conversation. Without this accommodation, he will not make expected gains on his IEP goals, okay? So those are the accommodations. And then there's a grid where they exist: reading, math, electives, online, outer space. I'm kidding about that. And so you need to make sure that grid is correct, okay? All right, then we have LRE, the least restrictive environment, or as the law says, the extent of non-participation, right? And that is done by content area. So make sure that we are providing a continuum of service options to the parents and to the team. And so we have general ed with a variety of scenarios. We have resource. Resource didn't go away. Are you sure it didn't go away, Karen? Because our district got rid of resource. They got rid of it. Oh, they did? Like on Monday, they just rolled it out to the curb and we're getting rid of resource. Well, that would be a problem because in 300, just a book of federal laws, 300.115, continuum of placements. And one of those continuum of placements is regular classes, special schools, instruction, and resource. Resource, such as resource or itinerant instruction. Resource. So if you have a campus, how many of you guys work at school and they told you they got rid of resource? They just got rid of it. We don't do that here. Yeah. This book, it's the federal law. It's a code of federal regulations. It's IDEA. You can get it on our website. And so if your district doesn't have resource, that's a problem, right? It's a problem for kids. It's a problem for teachers. It's a problem for students. And so make sure that your campus, every campus is required to have resource. That's for kiddos that are a few years behind and need more targeted intervention, slower cadence, and have a modified work. So general ed with accommodations, general ed with in-class support, general ed with special education support, general ed with co-teach, resource, and then self-contained classes, right? Autism units, behavioral units, life skills, therapeutic units, those sorts of things. But make sure that we are going over a continuum of placements. And so we go through the LRE, the least restrictive environment. I wish it was called the most supported setting. That sounds better than least restrictive environment. Here's what least restrictive environment isn't. It's not general ed. It's not. It doesn't even say general ed. It says that we are charged with educating our students to the maximum possible with non-disabled students with strategy supports and supplementary aids and services. So sometimes it's general ed, but not always. I hear teachers say, I've got to get him back to his LRE. Like he's lost. He's not. There's no going back. His LRE is determined on his current present levels, right? So, all right, so there's that. And then the schedule of services page. And so for most parents I represent, they're most concerned about the schedule of services page. But that really is a layup, right? Because we already determined that he has these areas of critical need in the present levels. We've written these amazing, pristine annual goals with implementers and evaluators, fantastic accommodations. We figured out his LRE. And then on the schedule of services page, you want to make sure that you've identified where the student is receiving special education services. There's no legal requirement to put in general ed, but you need to make sure that it's all populated there. And that's just a few of the pieces in IEP, but those are kind of the big five, right? Present levels, annual goals, accommodations, LRE, and schedule of services. And they're all lined out in the EPIC IEP, a book I wrote, a powerful playbook for parents, educators, and advocates navigating the IEP special education process. So I hope you guys are having a ridiculously amazing day. We love, love, love you. Come join us in the Academy. It's weekly professional development. We train in federal law and series, and then we open it up for questions. It is going to be the best night school that you ever went to, and we have all your questions answered there. If you need anything, let me know. You want to email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. Remember, we get it right for the child. We get it right for everybody. You guys go have a great day.